If Niccolò Machiavelli were alive today, he wouldn't be posting motivational threads on X or hustling on social media trying to look powerful. No, he'd be running empires quietly from the shadows. You wouldn't see him chasing attention or fighting for recognition. You'd only notice his fingerprints on everything, decisions, people, systems, and you'd never know how he did it. Because in a world that worships visibility, Machiavelli would rule through invisibility. And today, I'll show you exactly how he'd do it. Not through empty quotes, but through doctrine. 21 psychological laws of power that reveal how Machiavelli would control the modern world if he walked among us. Because remember his timeless insight. Men judge more by the eye than by the hand. Control how people see you, and you control what they do. Rule 1. Always let them underestimate you. Machiavelli knew that true power is safest when it's hidden. In today's age of flexing and proving yourself online, everyone is desperate to show off credentials, money, dominance, confidence. But Machiavelli would play it differently. He'd walk into the room quietly, not trying to be the loudest or the smartest. He'd listen first. He'd observe the battlefield. Then, when the moment was right, he'd speak a single sentence that shifts the entire dynamic. And no one would see it coming. That's how he'd control the room without ever announcing himself. Let them think you're harmless. Let them believe you're small, irrelevant, even weak. Because when people see you as no threat, they reveal their full hand. And that's when you strike, from a position they never even knew you had. Rule 2. Charm is more dangerous than truth. In today's world, truth rarely spreads. Perception does. Machiavelli understood this long before social media existed. He knew that people don't see reality, they see appearance. So he wouldn't waste time trying to prove he's honest or pure. He'd focus on being believed as honest, even if it wasn't true. He'd walk into boardrooms, charm his enemies, smile just enough, and plant ideas so subtle they'd think they came up with them themselves. That's the real art. Not to be good, but to be perceived as good. Don't correct how people see you. Exploit it. Let them crown you the hero while you quietly rewrite the ending. Rule 3. Create ambiguity on purpose. Most people are desperate to be understood. They explain themselves. They over-clarify. They want to be seen clearly. Machiavelli would do the opposite. He'd make sure no one could ever pin him down. One day cold, the next day kind. Sometimes silent, sometimes sharp. He wouldn't do it because he's inconsistent. He'd do it because confusion creates obsession. And obsession leads to focus. And focus leads to control. When people can't define you, they start studying you. They analyze every move, every silence, every glance. You stop being a person, you become a puzzle, and puzzles drive people insane. Machiavelli would say, "The people you control the most are the ones who think about you the most." So stop explaining yourself. Stop giving people clarity. Speak in half-truths. Leave sentences hanging. Smile when they ask questions you refuse to answer. Because mystery pulls gravity, and gravity pulls power. Rule 4. Control what they see. Hide what you do. In an age where everyone's documenting their lives, Machiavelli would do the opposite. He'd post strategically, but never reveal what actually matters. He'd let people think they're seeing everything, while in truth, they're seeing nothing. The second people know your methods, they start preparing counterattacks. They form alliances. They build defenses. Machiavelli's answer: be visible in output, invisible in input. Appear noble, move ruthlessly. Don't show your process. Don't announce your goals. Don't explain your systems until you've already won. Let them think you're idle, or distracted, or slow. Then pass them with a silence so sharp it cuts. Control the image. Guard the mechanism. Rule 5. Build a mask. then let it crack. Here's something Machiavelli understood centuries ago that modern influencers still don't. Perfection is forgettable. Flaws are addictive. So he'd build a mask, composed, intelligent, calm, confident, but then, at just the right moment, he'd let it fracture. A single flash of anger, a sharp truth, a glimpse of vulnerability. Something that feels real enough to make you think you've seen behind the curtain, but not enough to actually understand him. That's how you become unforgettable. Because people don't obsess over what they fully understand. They chase what's just out of reach. Give them 90% of your story, then go silent. They'll spend years chasing the missing 10%. Be the light, then reveal the shadow. Let them glimpse the abyss, then seal it again. They won't remember what you said. They'll remember how you made them feel. Rule 6. Say less than necessary always. Every time someone talks too much, they give away more than they realize. Their insecurities, their need for validation, their emotional weakness. Machiavelli wouldn't waste words. He used them like blades, short, sharp, and deliberate. In a meeting, in an argument, in any conflict, he'd speak 1 or 2 sentences, then go quiet. And that silence would terrify everyone in the room, because silence creates projection. When you say nothing, they start imagining everything. They start thinking, what does he know? What's he planning? Why isn't he reacting? You've said nothing, but they've already built a whole narrative around you. And in that narrative, you're the one in control. So when you speak, say exactly enough to shape the thought, then stop. Let them fill the silence with their anxiety. Because real mystery doesn't come from secrets. It comes from restraint. Rule 7. Blur the line between threat and ally. In modern life, everyone wants to know who's safe and who's not. Who's loyal, who's fake, who's dangerous. Machiavelli would never let anyone be sure. He'd praise enemies publicly. Sit with rivals at dinner, defend those he secretly planned to remove. Why? Because when people think you're dangerous, they prepare for war. But when they think you're neutral, they relax. And the best time to move is when everyone's asleep. He once said, "The lion cannot protect himself from traps, and the fox cannot defend himself from wolves." So be both. Compliment your rival before outmaneuvering them. Agree with your critic right before replacing them. Stay warm, friendly, even supportive, until the moment you move. By then, it's already over. Modern translation. Say less, smile more, play neutral, then act while they're still confused whether you were ever a threat. Rule 8. Make them feel safe right before you take power. You don't defeat people by attacking them. You defeat them by making them trust you. Machiavelli would study your habits, mirror your words, validate your ego. He'd make you feel like you were in control. He'd make you think he was learning from you, when really, he was learning about you. He'd let you win, just enough to feel safe. Then, when you finally stop watching, he moves. Fast, clean, quiet. By the time you feel betrayed, it's already done. He once said, "Men are so simple and so much inclined to obey immediate needs that a deceiver will never lack victims. So tell people what they want to hear, show them what they want to see, then take what they never thought you'd touch, all while smiling." Rule 9. Make people dependent, then walk away. Machiavelli wouldn't dominate by force. He'd dominate by usefulness. He'd help people in ways that subtly made them rely on him. He'd solve problems no one else could, provide stability they hadn't earned, become essential without demanding anything in return, and then he'd disappear. Because nothing devastates someone more than losing the person they didn't realize they depended on. He'd become their necessary illusion, the presence they thought was optional. until it was gone. That's how you make yourself unforgettable, not by staying, but by leaving. Rule 10. Weaponize the favor. Most people offer help to be liked. Machiavelli would help to create leverage. If he gave you something, he'd never demand repayment. He'd just let the debt sit, heavy and silent, until you felt it on your own. Every time you saw him, you'd remember, you'd feel it, that quiet imbalance, that unspoken obligation. And one day, without realizing it, you'd pay it back with loyalty, with information, with obedience. That's how favors become chains. And the longer they stay unacknowledged, the heavier they feel. Rule 11. Manufacture loyalty by letting them betray others for you. Most people think loyalty is earned through kindness, trust, or generosity. Machiavelli knew that's not true. Loyalty built on admiration fades. Loyalty built on guilt and complicity, that lasts forever. He would never force betrayal. He would allow it. He'd simply create small opportunities where others could break their moral code for him. Maybe they share a secret that wasn't theirs to tell. Maybe they speak badly about someone to win his approval. Maybe they bend a rule just once to help him out. He wouldn't ask. He'd just leave the door slightly open, and they'd walk through it on their own. Now they're tied to him, not through love, but through shared wrongdoing. They can't expose him without exposing themselves. They protect him because protecting him means protecting their own reputation. People defend what they've compromised themselves for. That's how you turn followers into prisoners, not through power, but through participation. Machiavelli didn't recruit allies. He built accomplices. Rule 12. Break alliances from the inside. He didn't just outsmart individuals. He dismantled entire groups. But never by attacking them directly. That would make him a target. Instead, he'd let the alliance collapse under its own weight. He'd identify the strongest bond inside that group, maybe the two most trusted friends, and plant the smallest seed of doubt. Something as simple as, you ever notice how he doesn't defend you when others criticize? Or, I'm not saying she's fake, but watch her closely. That's all it takes. You don't have to destroy trust. You just have to crack it. Once the crack appears, fear does the rest. Each person starts testing the other. Every silence feels suspicious. Every word feels loaded. And soon, the group turns inward, destroying itself from within. Machiavelli wrote, "He who causes another to become powerful ruins himself." So he'd never confront power. He'd make power confront itself. Let paranoia finish what he started. Rule 13. Reflect their insecurities back at them, gently. You want to control someone? Don't threaten them. Make them feel understood. Not with compliments, but with subtle comments that touch their hidden fears. Say things like, "You've really grown, especially for someone who's always been underestimated. You always find a way, even when people don't take you seriously. You're strong, even when your confidence doesn't show it." These statements sound supportive, but they quietly reinforce their own doubts. You've positioned yourself as the person who gets them. And the moment they believe that, they stop resisting you. They start seeking your approval. They open up. They lower their guard. Machiavelli understood that fear and insecurity are far more effective than direct threats, because threats activate defense mechanisms. But when you mirror someone's insecurity softly, you enter through the side door of their mind. Once you're in, you don't need control. They give it to you willingly. Rule 14. Never be the one holding the knife. Every great manipulator knows this. The one who does the dirty work pays the price. The one who orchestrates it from a distance walks away clean. Machiavelli would never be the executioner. He'd simply set the stage for others to act. If someone needed to be removed, he'd whisper ideas into the right ears. If a rival needed to fall, he'd create the perfect situation for them to self-destruct. If chaos needed to erupt, he'd feed both sides just enough information, then step back before the fire spread. By the time it's over, everyone else looks guilty. He looks inevitable. And that's the art, letting others carry out your intentions while you stay untouchable. Because when people see you as the cause of their suffering, they become your enemy. But when you make it look like fate or their own decision, they accept it. That's the illusion of clean hands. You orchestrated everything. You controlled everyone, and no one can prove it. Rule 15. Say nothing and let them reveal everything. In a world full of noise, the quiet one holds the real power. Machiavelli would never compete with the loudest voice in the room. He'd sit back and let others fill the silence, knowing they'd eventually expose their intentions. Because silence makes people uncomfortable and discomfort makes them talk. When someone insults you, say nothing. When someone demands your opinion, smile and let them keep talking. When someone tries to provoke emotion, stay calm, blink slowly, and watch. Every word they say after that silence is a confession. They'll start revealing fears, secrets, weaknesses, just to escape the weight of your stillness. You don't have to interrogate them. They'll hand you the information themselves. Machiavelli once wrote, "Never attempt to win by force what can be won by deception." And silence is deception's most elegant weapon. He wouldn't argue. He'd let others argue themselves into corners. He wouldn't debate. He'd listen until they revealed the very thing they were trying to hide. Because the less you say, the more others expose. Rule 16. Be unpredictable, but only when it matters. Machiavelli wouldn't be erratic. He'd be calculatedly unpredictable. He'd appear steady until the moment it's useful not to be. Predictability breeds manipulation. If people always know when you'll respond, how you'll react, or what moral ground you'll stand on, they can build strategies around you. But when sometimes you forgive and other times you vanish, sometimes you engage, and sometimes you let them burn themselves out. Sometimes you take the high road, and sometimes you disappear into silence. They can never anticipate you, and when they can't predict you, they can't prepare for you. Machiavelli understood that love wins hearts, but fear maintains order, and the root of fear is uncertainty. People don't fear your strength. They fear your unpredictability, because unpredictability is chaos, and chaos can't be controlled. Rule 17. Make your presence felt, even in absence. The ultimate power isn't being there all the time. It's being felt even when you're not. Machiavelli would create psychological echoes. A reputation so sharp that people still think twice before acting, even when he's nowhere near. He'd become a standard, the measuring stick everyone unconsciously uses. You'd hear people say, "What would he do?" Or, "He wouldn't approve of this," long after he's gone. That's not charisma, that's imprinting. He'd leave a mental shadow in every mind he touched. How? By being measured, by being deliberate, by showing surgical control when he's present, so that his absence feels heavier than anyone else's presence. That's how you build psychological dominance. You don't control people while you're in the room. You control them after you leave it. They second-guess their decisions, compare others to you, and live under the silent pressure of your memory. That's not influence, that's legacy. Machiavelli wouldn't fire people. He'd train them to follow his rules even in his absence. And that's the kind of power that never dies. Rule 18. 18. Never threaten. Let fear do the work. The weak use threats. The strong use silence. Machiavelli never said, "I'll destroy you." He let others imagine what he might do, and that imagination, that unknown, was far more powerful than any promise of revenge. You don't need to say, "I could expose you." Just pause when they lie and let the silence sit. You don't need to say, "You're finished." Just disappear and let their anxiety spiral into panic. Because fear based on information fades once explained. But fear based on imagination never dies. When people start fearing what you might do, they begin to police themselves. They start seeking your approval just to avoid triggering your silence. That's the deepest form of control, when people obey you out of their own paranoia. Rule 19. Delay your revenge until it becomes devastating. Machiavelli didn't believe in emotional reactions or impulsive retaliation. He believed in timing. Quick revenge is satisfying but forgettable. Strategic revenge, delivered at the perfect moment, changes everything. He once wrote, "Injuries should be inflicted all at once, so that their ill savor may be less." Meaning, when you finally strike, strike so hard that no one ever thinks of crossing you again. If someone wronged him, Machiavelli wouldn't argue. He'd watch. He'd wait. He'd let them relax, let them think they'd gotten away with it. He'd study how they move, who they trust, where they feel untouchable. Then, when they least expect it, he'd move fast, silent, total. Because revenge isn't about hurting them, it's about reclaiming control. When you react instantly, you let the offender set the rhythm. They dictate your moves. But when you wait, when you let paranoia marinate, they live every day wondering when the punishment will come. Every text notification makes them flinch. Every silence feels like a storm brewing. That fear becomes your silent weapon. You've already won long before you act. Machiavelli knew that patience turns power into terror. So don't strike when you're angry. Strike when you're ready. And make sure when you do, there's nothing left standing but the lesson. Rule 20. Become a system, not a man. Machiavelli never wanted to be famous. He wanted to be inevitable. Because when you depend on your personality for power, you can be replaced. But when your way of thinking becomes the system everyone operates under, you become permanent. He wouldn't chase status. He'd embed himself into the structure. He'd train people to think like him, act like him, solve problems through his philosophy. He'd make himself so essential that removing him would mean collapsing the entire machine. That's real power, when your absence is more expensive than your presence. In today's world, that means stop being a name and start being a network. Stop being a single player. Become the framework others rely on to function. Be the process, the idea, the method that runs underneath everything. So even if they don't want you, they can't delete you. Because you're not just part of the system. You are the system. That's not fame. That's psychological infrastructure. That's legacy. Rule 21. Make them afraid to speak your name. The final stage of Machiavellian power is transcendence. Not being seen, not being followed, but being feared in absence. Machiavelli would never crave popularity. He wouldn't trend. He'd haunt. People wouldn't mention him directly, they'd reference him indirectly. You know who I mean. Don't end up like him. You know how that move played out last time. That's the goal. To become a ghost that still commands a room. When people hesitate to even say your name because it carries weight, that's when you've achieved the final form of influence. He wouldn't win debates or chase recognition. He'd dominate through atmosphere. When he walks in, tension rises. When he leaves, the silence changes temperature. Because real power isn't about control, it's about conditioning. It's when your reputation makes people think twice before acting, even when you're nowhere near them. They don't fear your retaliation. They fear your memory. That's the invisible crown. That's the empire you build without showing your face. And that's how Machiavelli would win today. Not through fame, not through attention, through silence, patience, structure, and a legacy they can't erase. If Machiavelli were alive right now, he wouldn't be online arguing about power. He wouldn't be proving his worth in comment sections. He'd be shaping narratives in silence, deciding who gets remembered and who gets erased. He'd be the whisper behind billion-dollar movements, the invisible architect in political chaos, the quiet force behind every decision that looked like destiny. And when people asked, who's really running things, they'd say his name like a secret. Because in the end, true dominance doesn't need applause. It doesn't need followers. It needs control and the discipline to stay unseen. Let's recap the doctrine. Machiavelli's 21 modern rules of psychological power. 1. Let them underestimate you. 2. Charm is more dangerous than truth. 3. Create ambiguity on purpose. 4. Control what they see. Hide what you do. 5. Build a mask, then let it fracture. 6. Say less than necessary. 7. Blur the line between threat and ally. 8. Make them feel safe before you take power. 9. Make people dependent, then walk away. 10. Weaponize the favor. 11. Manufacture loyalty through complicity. 12. Break alliances from the inside. 13. Reflect their insecurity softly. 14. Never hold the knife yourself. 15. Use silence to make them reveal everything. 16. Be unpredictable, but only when it matters. 17. Make your presence felt even in absence. 18. Never threaten, let fear do the work. 19. Delay revenge until it's absolute. 20. Become a system, not a man. 21. Make them afraid to even say your name. If Machiavelli lived in this era, where everyone screams for validation, where exposure is confused with power and noise is mistaken for strength, he'd win by doing the exact opposite. He'd move quietly, build strategically, observe endlessly, and strike only once. He'd teach you that influence isn't about how many see you, it's about how deeply you live in their minds. That's the art of the unseen. That's how you bend a world addicted to noise, with silence sharp enough to cut through it. That's how Machiavelli would outsmart everyone today. Machiavelli's brilliance wasn't that he wrote The Prince. It's that he saw the game centuries before the rest of the world realized it existed. He understood that human nature doesn't evolve, only its disguise changes. Power still flows from perception. Control still begins with emotion. And those who see the world as it is, not as it pretends to be, always rule the ones who live by illusion. So, if he were alive today, Machiavelli wouldn't chase trends or followers. He'd study the patterns, the psychology behind why people crave attention, why they fear rejection, and why they trade their freedom for validation. He'd see social media not as entertainment, but as a weapon. Because every like, every share, every reaction is data. And whoever controls perception controls behavior. He'd quietly use that chaos to build an empire, not by shouting, but by predicting, not by dominating the feed, but by understanding the ones addicted to it. You see, the modern world is built on noise, and Machiavelli would never compete in noise. He'd weaponize silence. He'd know that the most powerful person in a world of oversharing is the one who reveals nothing. The most respected one in a world of opinions is the one who speaks rarely. And the most feared one in a world of exposure is the one who moves unseen. Machiavelli's real genius was his detachment. He never let morality cloud his understanding of human behavior. He knew that even good people act from fear, greed, or survival. And that if you can read these motives, you can control anyone. He wouldn't call it manipulation. He'd call it clarity. Because when you stop expecting people to be noble, you stop being surprised by how easily they can be led. He'd use empathy, not as kindness, but as a form of X-ray vision. He'd listen not to agree, but to decode. He'd smile not to please, but to measure. Every silence would serve a purpose. Every word would be a move. Every reaction would be a mirror held up to others, reflecting their true selves back at them. Machiavelli would understand what most never grasp, that people aren't moved by logic. They're moved by stories, by emotions, by what they believe to be true. So he wouldn't fight for the truth. He'd build the story that felt truer than truth. In business, he'd never fight competitors directly. He'd seed doubt, shape narratives, control timing, and let others destroy each other while he stayed silent. He'd let the ambitious reveal their greed, the self-righteous expose their hypocrisy, and the naive exhaust themselves trying to look good. And when the smoke cleared, he'd already be sitting where they once stood. He'd teach you that leadership isn't about being loved. It's about being necessary. Because once people need you, it doesn't matter if they hate you, they can't replace you. That's the Machiavellian paradox. To be loved is optional. To be essential is power. He'd build systems so intricate that his enemies would unknowingly reinforce them. He'd turn criticism into curiosity, and curiosity into control. And when others fought for attention, he'd fight for silence, because silence gives birth to imagination, and imagination is the birthplace of fear. He'd tell you that the greatest mistake in life is confusing morality with strategy. Machiavelli never said to be evil. He said to understand evil, so it can't be used against you. He'd argue that morality without intelligence is weakness, and intelligence without morality is chaos. So the wise don't abandon their values. They learn when to suspend them. They don't destroy enemies out of hate. They remove them out of necessity. They don't act cruelly for pleasure. They act decisively to maintain order. That's not darkness. That's discipline. If he were alive now, Machiavelli wouldn't teach you how to win arguments. He'd teach you how to become the argument, the standard everyone else measures themselves against. He'd tell you to stop chasing fairness and start studying power. Because fairness is an illusion created by the powerful to keep others predictable. He'd remind you that those who seek to be liked are ruled by those who don't care, and those who fear being misunderstood will always serve the ones who stay silent. He'd say, let them think you're cruel if you must. Let them call you distant, calculating, even heartless. Because the same people who curse your name will one day need your strength. Machiavelli's world wasn't about cruelty. It was about clarity of purpose. To rule yourself first. To never beg for understanding. To act with intent. And to never waste motion explaining it. If you want to live like Machiavelli today, start small. Control your emotions before trying to control outcomes. Control what you reveal before trying to influence others. Control your need for validation, and the world will start seeking yours. Power doesn't begin with dominance. It begins with detachment. The less you need to prove, the more people will assume you have. The less you reveal, the more they'll study you. And the quieter you become, the more they'll listen when you finally speak. Machiavelli would say, win without noise, build without witness, move without warning. Because once you master invisibility, they can't stop what they can't see. That's how Machiavelli would outsmart everyone today. Not through charisma, not through force, but through psychological precision and the patience to play the long game while everyone else burns out in the short one. Power isn't taken. It's engineered through patience, perception, and precision. If Machiavelli stood in our modern world, surrounded by ambition and noise, he wouldn't raise his voice. He'd raise his understanding. Because while others chase validation, he'd chase leverage. And leverage, not luck, not popularity, is what silently decides who wins. He would tell you that the real battlefield isn't out there. It's in perception, in how people see, fear, or depend on you. That's where true control lives. You can't dominate the visible world until you learn to dominate the invisible one. The psychology beneath every smile, every handshake, every silence. The new arena. Control in the age of exposure. The modern world rewards noise. It worships the loud, the visible, the endlessly self-promoting. But Machiavelli would see it differently. He'd recognize that attention has become the new currency, and the more people spend it, the cheaper it gets. He wouldn't post every win or prove every move. He'd let curiosity do the marketing. He'd understand that the ones who speak least are studied most. The ones who move unpredictably become legends, because when people can't read you, they can't prepare for you. In a digital world where everyone shows everything, invisibility is the new superpower. Machiavelli would weaponize that invisibility not by retreating, but by choosing what deserves exposure. He'd post enough to stay relevant, but never enough to be understood. He'd reveal strategy only after it's already succeeded. He'd make success look effortless, not explained, not defended, just demonstrated. He'd teach you that in an age of constant performance, privacy is rebellion, and mystery is dominance. The Modern Prince, how power actually works today. If Machiavelli were reborn as a strategist in this era leading corporations, political movements, or digital empires, he'd rewrite the Prince for the 21st century. He'd say, power isn't built on force anymore. It's built on psychological architecture. Today, control doesn't come from armies. It comes from information, from shaping the story before anyone knows it's a story. He'd move quietly through institutions, not fighting existing systems, but rewriting their rules from within. He wouldn't overthrow power. He'd redesign it. He wouldn't attack enemies. He'd fund them, study them, and guide their collapse. Because the modern Machiavelli would understand, destruction isn't efficient. Influence is. He'd say, never fight what you can redirect. Never confront what you can corrupt. Never expose what you can quietly absorb. That's how you win today. Not with confrontation, but with control of context. The inner empire. Mastering yourself before the world. Machiavelli's philosophy wasn't about tyranny. It was about realism. About seeing the world and yourself without illusion. He'd remind you, before you control others, you must control your own impulses. Before you study the psychology of your enemies, you must master your own emotions. He'd teach you the power of emotional discipline, the art of never reacting immediately, of observing before deciding, of letting others burn their energy while you remain still. Because stillness isn't weakness, it's strategy. When you stop reacting, you start observing. And when you observe long enough, patterns emerge. And once you see the pattern, you can control the outcome. He'd tell you to study your anger until it becomes clarity. Study your fear until it becomes foresight. Study your silence until it becomes pressure. That's the transformation Machiavelli practiced, turning emotion into weaponry, reaction into command. He'd say, the man who cannot rule himself has no right to rule others. Self-control is the foundation of power, because when nothing owns you, no one can. The psychology of presence. Machiavelli knew that words fade, but presence lingers. He'd show you that every gesture, every glance, every pause sends a message. And if you master those messages, you don't need to talk much. He'd teach you to stand still when others rush, to look calm when others panic, to speak slowly when others shout. Because in chaos, the calm man becomes the compass. He'd say, power isn't loud, it's gravitational. People will orbit those who radiate certainty, even if that certainty is silent. So Machiavelli would walk into a room and say less than anyone, yet command more attention than everyone. Not because of arrogance, but because his energy is directed. While others scatter their presence, he condenses his. He'd move slowly, not to delay, but to make others adjust to his rhythm. Because control isn't just about action, it's about pace. Whoever sets the tempo controls the outcome. The ruthless art of detachment, Machiavelli would remind you. Attachment is the enemy of strategy. Once you care too deeply about being liked, you become predictable. Once you fear being misunderstood, you become controllable. He'd say, don't chase affection, don't demand loyalty, inspire necessity. When people depend on you, their emotions no longer matter. They can hate you, but they'll still serve you, because their survival depends on it. And the only way to reach that level of control is by being emotionally independent. No reaction too strong. No insult too personal. No betrayal too surprising. You study every event for what it teaches, not for how it feels. Because Machiavelli knew, the one who controls meaning controls the memory. Detach not to be cold, but to stay clear. You can't manipulate chaos if you're emotionally drowning in it. The legacy code. Becoming unforgettable. Machiavelli didn't want to be loved in his lifetime. He wanted to be remembered forever, and that's exactly what happened. 5 centuries later, his name still symbolizes strategic genius, not because he ruled, but because he understood rulers better than they understood themselves. If he were here today, he'd tell you, you don't need to win the crowd, you need to shape the world they live in. That's how you outlast fame. That's how you outlive reputation, by embedding your thinking so deeply that even your absence has influence. He'd say, be the ghost in the algorithm, the unseen rule behind every rule. That's how Machiavelli would live in 2025, not as a public figure, but as a structure of thought woven into every act of power, politics, and persuasion. He wouldn't be chasing visibility, he'd own invisibility, because while fame fades, control remains. Final lesson. The invisible crown. Machiavelli's 21 rules weren't about cruelty. They were about clarity. The clarity to see the world without illusion, and yourself without delusion. He'd tell you that life is a chessboard, and most people are pawns, reacting, emoting, oversharing, exposing every move. But the Machiavellian mind watches in silence, predicts in shadows, and strikes with timing so perfect it looks effortless. He'd leave you with one final doctrine. Never announce power. Display it subtly. Let people feel it before they understand it. By the time they name it, it already owns them. That's how Machiavelli would outsmart everyone today. Not with rage, not with fame, not with applause, but with control so quiet, it feels like destiny. Because the world doesn't belong to those who shout the loudest. It belongs to those who see the game, while everyone else is still playing by rules they didn't write. And when you master that, when you stop reacting and start designing, you'll understand the truth Machiavelli lived for. Power doesn't reveal who you are. It reveals who you've always been. That's his final rule. That's his invisible crown, and that's how the modern prince still wins.